It was a fall night, several years ago. In the middle of a quiet lake in Northern California sat a small, empty island. No people, no houses, nothing. Trevor, Megan, Rosie, and a few of their friends had decided to spend their weekend off a little differently. They rowed out to the island in a small wooden motorboat. The plan was to camp there for the night, pitch a tent under the open sky, and get away from the noise of the city for a few hours. After they reached the island, they walked around and looked at the place. It was so small that you could walk all the way around it in less than half an hour. There were no cabins anywhere, no old docks, no sign that anyone had ever lived there. Just thick pine trees, dry leaves, and the dark water of the lake. On the shore, their motorboat was the only boat around. In the water nearby, they didn't see a single light or another boat anchored anywhere. As soon as daylight faded, the whole place sank into an eerie silence. They lit a fire and sat around it deep in stories when Megan noticed something first. A little way off, from behind the thick pine trees, came the clear sound of dry branches snapping and cracking. It sounded like something heavy was walking slowly toward them. Megan hesitated for a moment, then told her friend she thought something was behind the trees. But Trevor laughed it off. The island was so small, he said, that there was no way a large wild animal could live there. Besides, they had already walked the whole area that afternoon. They hadn't seen a single animal track. For a few minutes, everything went quiet again. Nothing could be heard except the crackle of the fire and the faint sound of waves in the distance. Right then, Rosie suddenly noticed something white, deep in the woods, peek out from behind a tree for a moment and then vanish again. The thing disappeared before she could get a good look at it. The others figured it was probably just moonlight hitting a dry tree trunk, tricking her eyes. But within a few minutes, the sound came back. This time, it was closer and clearer. It was as if someone was breaking dry branches on purpose, trying to get their attention, to clear his doubts. Trevor turned on his strong flashlight and pointed it at the dark trees. The moment the bright beam cut through the pine forest, everyone's heart dropped. At the far edge of the light, faintly, behind two thick trees, they could make out two people standing there. They were completely still. No movement at all. They were just staring at the group in a way that felt deeply wrong. Trevor and one of his friends worked up the nerve to step forward. The distance wasn't very far, but after just a few steps, the two figures seemed to vanish like smoke. There was nothing there but empty woods and a pile of dry leaves. At that exact moment, a thin, cold laugh drifted out of the darkness and rippled through the deep silence around them. The sound was so strange that no one could tell if it came from one person or from several. Now, no one had the nerve to stay there. Another moment, everyone rushed to tear down the tent. They even left some bags and cooking gear behind and ran straight for the boat. Trevor was just about to start the engine when Megan froze in fear. None of them had noticed when a woman appeared, standing in the muddy water by the shore. Just moments ago, that spot had been completely empty. She was wearing dirty old clothes, the kind that looked like they hadn't been washed in years. Most of her face was hidden behind her hair. Even in the dark, it was clear that she was staring straight at Trevor. Then, very slowly, in an unnaturally calm voice, she called out Trevor's name. "Trevor, come into the woods, just once. There's something I want to show you." On that empty island, where there wasn't supposed to be anyone else with them, the thought of how this stranger knew Trevor's name sent chills down everyone's spine. For a few seconds, Trevor just stood there, as if he were under some kind of spell. There was no fear in his eyes. If anything, It looked like he actually wanted to step off the boat. His friend didn't waste another second. He grabbed Trevor and forced him into the boat. Right at that moment, the woman let out that same thin laugh again. The instant Trevor was pulled aboard, the motorboat took off from the island at full speed. When they reached the middle of the lake and looked back one more time, their blood ran cold all over again. The spot that, just minutes earlier, had been nothing but an empty shore, and trees now had several huge, human-shaped figures standing there, built out of wood, dry branches, and sticks. In the last light of the dying fire, they stood lined up, as if silently watching the group leave. Nothing like that had been there when they first arrived on the island, or when they walked the whole area that evening. And building something that big in just a few minutes should have been flat out impossible. The next morning, they reported what happened to the lake authorities. A few rangers took a boat out to the island and searched the whole place, but they found no people, no sign of a camp, and not even a trace of the huge wooden figures from the night before. All that was left on the shore were a few things Trevor and his friends had left behind. There was no sign of any other boat having been in the water nearby either. To this day, no one has ever found an answer for what they really saw that night, or whether anyone was actually on that island with them. But the most frightening part was still to come. A few months after it all happened, late one night, Trevor got his first call from an unknown number. The moment he picked up, there were a few seconds of silence on the other end. Then came that same thin, cold laugh. The call cut off right after. From then on, year after year, every so often, late at night, a call would come to his phone from an unknown number. Every time he picked it up, all he'd hear on the other end was that same ice-cold laugh. And the last time, just a moment before the laugh, there was a whisper, "Trevor." It happened at a quiet, isolated marina on the Pacific coast of the United States. There, aside from the soft lapping of waves and the slow, steady creak of a boat rubbing against the wooden dock, an uneasy silence hung over the place almost all the time. A man kept his boat on one of the transit slips at that marina, someone who had been used to being around boats since he was a child. The sea and the marina environment were nothing new to him at all. He later said that he could easily tell the normal smell of the water, the sound of the wood, or any unusual change around him. It happened on a cloudy winter day. That afternoon, a middle-aged man docked his boat at an empty slit next door. At first, no one knew his name, but later, from the marina's records, it came out that his name was Buddy. While the boat was being tied to the dock, the man from next door kindly stepped over and offered to help. But Buddy turned down the help flatly, in a cold and harsh way, without saying another word. He quickly went into the boat's cabin and shut the door. Right from that first meeting, his behavior seemed strange. A little while later, a strong, rotting smell started drifting from Buddy's boat. The smell was so strange that it cut right through the marina's usual smell of salt water and diesel. As evening fell, the stench grew even stronger. Right around then, in the quiet of the night, sounds started coming from inside Buddy's cabin. Something heavy being dragged or moved, like the noise of things being smashed, and mixed in between, low, muffled groaning sounds. The sounds were so unclear that there was no way to know for sure whether someone else was in there, or whether the noise was coming from something else entirely. The next morning, at dawn, Buddy was seen getting off his boat and heading toward the marina's shower building, with no one else around, driven by curiosity and unease. The man from next door carefully walked over toward Buddy's boat. As soon as he got close to the cabin door, that same unbearable stench from the day before hit him again. Right then, from behind the wooden door, he heard a strange sound, a low whisper mixed with a choked, muffled groan, as if someone inside was trying to make some kind of sound. But the moment he saw Buddy coming back, he didn't stay there another second. He hurried back to his own boat and sat there, deeply unsettled by the whole thing. The most terrifying thing happened the next night. Deep in the night, at around 3 in the morning, everything around was completely silent. Suddenly, a furious voice came from Buddy's cabin. He kept shouting over and over, "Shut up!" Then even louder, "Enough!" The shouting was so intense that it cut through the silent night and echoed out over the marina's water. The man later said the voice sounded like he was exploding with rage at someone, even though no one else could be seen anywhere. The very next morning, without any announcement or goodbye, Buddy quietly took his boat and left the marina. After that, he was never seen there again. But even after he left, that strong, rotting smell, the screaming heard deep in the night, and the muffled groaning from inside the cabin stayed burned into the neighbor's mind. He later admitted that the question of whether he should have taken it seriously and reported it to the authorities had haunted him for many years. Whether there really was someone trapped inside Buddy's boat that day, or whether some other dark truth was hiding behind the whole thing, the answer remains unknown to this day. And that unresolved question still quietly follows the man around, like a lonely night that never ends. This happened a few years ago. A man named Michael went out fishing with his 2 friends, Dustin and Chris. Dustin owned a small fishing boat of his own. That morning, the sea was unusually calm. A light fog hung all around them, and a cold ocean wind blew steadily through it. All 3 of them figured the day would go just like any other ordinary day of fishing. But after they'd gone about 10 miles from shore, Dustin spotted a small yacht floating in the distance. He immediately slowed the boat down. At first, it didn't seem like anything unusual, but as they got a little closer, they noticed a bright orange distress flag flying from the yacht's mast. At sea, a signal like that means only one thing: someone on board is in trouble and needs urgent help. Given the situation, they decided they should at least go take a look. Dustin carefully brought their boat up alongside the yacht. Chris and Dustin kept the boat steady from below, while Michael grabbed a rope and carefully jumped up onto the yacht's deck. He said later that the moment his feet touched the deck, a strange kind of silence made him uneasy. All around him, there was nothing to hear except the soft lapping of waves and the rattle of a rope knocking against the mast. Michael called out loudly a few times, "Hello? Anyone in there?" But no answer came. Lying out on the open deck were 2 jackets and a few fishing rods. Everything was scattered around as if someone had been using it just moments before. Not seeing anyone else around, he slowly pushed open the door to the main cabin and stepped inside. The moment he stepped into the cabin, he froze. On a small wooden table sat a mug, still slowly letting off steam. The sharp smell of coffee filled the whole cabin. It was clear the coffee had been poured just a minute or 2 earlier, and yet there wasn't a single person around. Michael claimed later that it was in that exact moment that he felt, for the first time, a strange kind of fear rise up in him. He had no answer for how a person could pour hot coffee on a table in the middle of the ocean on a moving yacht and then just vanish. The unease was slowly turning into fear. Right then, his eyes landed on the back berth of the cabin. Something was covered there with a thick blanket. At first, he thought it was maybe a bag or some other piece of luggage, but a few seconds later, the blanket moved. just barely. His heart lurched inside his chest. Keeping himself as calm as he could, Michael slowly stepped forward. In a low voice, he said, "Are you okay?" The moment he finished speaking, an old woman slowly sat up from under the blanket. Her hair was completely tangled and her face was unnaturally pale. But the most frightening thing was her eyes. She stared straight at Michael, unblinking. There was no feeling in her eyes, no surprise. She didn't blink even once the entire time. She didn't say a single word. Michael said later that her stare didn't feel like the stare of a living person at all, as if some still unmoving presence was simply sitting there, looking at him. A sudden, invisible fear seemed to numb Michael's entire body. He didn't stay there a moment longer. He rushed out of the cabin, crossed the yacht's deck, and jumped back onto his own boat. Without any explanation, he told Dustin and Chris to get them out of there as fast as possible. According to his friends, they could tell just from the look on his face that he'd seen something inside that yacht that had terrified him badly. Once they got back to shore, they wasted no time reporting the whole thing to the local Coast Guard and police. Michael gave the authorities the approximate coordinates as best as he could remember them. But by the time the rescue team reached the location, there was no yacht there anymore. They searched the surrounding stretch of ocean for hours, but found no trace of the orange-flagged yacht or the mysterious old woman. It was as if the entire event had been wiped from the sea in an instant. The story could have ended there, but after Michael got back to shore, his life was never the same again. He claimed that after that day, one strange misfortune after another began to follow him. His business collapsed badly for no clear reason. Doctors couldn't identify any specific illness, but he felt physically sick for a long time. And the most unsettling part was that almost every night, he'd wake up hearing the same sound, as if, somewhere in the dark, waves were crashing endlessly against the side of a boat. Many old fishermen along the coast still talk about a strange warning to this day. They believe that sometimes, out in the middle of the ocean, something floats out there that isn't meant for the living. Did Michael really go to help someone in danger? Or did he unknowingly come face to face with something unknown? Something people aren't meant to see? No acceptable explanation has ever been found for the hot coffee, the silent old woman, or the yacht that mysteriously disappeared. Whether it's true or just a legend, the story is still talked about as one of the strangest mysteries off the coast of North Carolina.